Hello, 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 my friends. Welcome, WriteHiveCon 2025, to this panel on navigating querying as a middle grade author. I'm your host, Nicholas W. Fuller. I wrote a book that's over there, right? You can check that out. That's just released at the time of the con. And I'm joined by a wonderful panel of lovely ladies that have all written middle grade books, and we're going to go talk about that. Let's run through, and you guys can each introduce yourselves, and we're going to get into the topic after. So let's start with Yxavel.
Hi everyone, good morning from Sydney, Australia. My name is Yxavel, and I am the author of The Serpent Rider and The Firefly Crown, which are both middle grade fantasy novels inspired by Filipino folklore. So, my first book, The Serpent Rider, is about a girl who must travel through a land inspired by Filipino folklore to rescue her kidnapped sister before a moon-eating sea serpent swallows the world's final moon. And my upcoming book, The Firefly Crown, which is coming out in the US in November this year, is about a girl who has to master her cricket insect magic in order to find the missing firefly crown to save her empire from a massive swarm of undead ghost insects that devours anything living. So yeah, those are my books, both inspired by Filipino folklore. And thanks so much for having me on the panel today.
Love it. Very creative and interesting. Moniza.
Hi, my name is Moniza Hossain, and I am a writer who writes a bunch of different for a bunch of different age groups. So the book that's up there right now is actually a picture book. It's called Street Puppy Masjid Cat, and it's coming out in October, but it's available for pre-order now. It's about the unlikely friendship between lonely stray dog and a pampered house cat. So if that sounds like something you want to read to your kid, then you might enjoy this book. I also write middle grade, and I have a middle grade horror that's coming out next year in fall. And that story is called The Fear Factory. And it's about a boy who visits his grandmother in Singapore and finds his mom's ghost trapped in his grandma's house. And she's trapped at the age of 12. So together they need to figure out why she's trapped and why she can't move on to the afterlife. And they have to solve a crime in order to do it. So it's a mystery, but it's also a ghost story. And yeah, that's me. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate DeMaio. I am the author of Fiona and the Forgotten Piano, which I like to describe as a scavenger hunt through hidden worlds with a musical tone as well. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm happy to be here with you all today.
And Patchree.
Hi, I'm Patchree Jones, a middle grade fantasy author. I am the author of The White Elephant of Himapon, and which is more of a chapter book for middle grade readers. But I also am the author of Skylight, the Make Light series. I'm happy to be here. I've been with Right Hive for a while, so most of my stories are often Thai inspired. Even though I'm based here in Los Angeles, born and raised in the United States, my family is from Thailand. So it's a great way for me to connect and create something to pass on to the next generation of Thai American readers.
Very cool. I love the diversity in this panel. I love moderating these panels and getting to talk with people all over the world. I love we've got our time travel over in Australia. It's great. It's great. All right. So for the purpose of this discussion, I think it's helpful to start with just two definitions. First, and I'm going to put Patchree on the spot because I know you have some experience. Can you tell us, just give us a definition of how do we define middle grade stories, please?
Sure. Oftentimes, when you think of middle grade, it tends to vary in terms of regions, but often if you're thinking of students who are in sixth to eighth grade, that's one sector of middle grade. So age-wise, you're looking at kids who are between 10 to 12, but a lot of times that panel and that age range widens a little bit for middle grade readers where you're going as early as fourth grade. So you're looking at 8-year-olds to 12 and 13-year-olds. So middle grade really kind of captures that center of it where we're a little bit too old for picture books and chapter books, but we're not quite there at young adults and high school stories yet. So you're still trying to harness the imagination of those young readers and keep them continuing on reading those stories that are kind of geared towards them, featuring 10 to 12-year-old main characters and putting them in all sorts of crazy situations that all of us at that pivotal time point, we all kind of go through. So middle grade is that age range there.
Love it. Building on that, actually, let me kind of to everyone in the panel, are there any like big name middle grades that sort of come up that are like genre definers? Anyone want to jump in with like a something that people might know is like, oh, that I've heard of that story before.
Well, I mean, Percy Jackson is the genre-defining middle grade, I guess.
Perfect. Definitely heard of that. Cool. All right. So the other definition that I want to kind of get to is querying, right? And so I write adult fiction, which sounds different than it is. But no, like it's just, books for adults, right? And I think a lot of folks are writing books for adult. That's, maybe the standard for a lot of people coming into writing. So in the querying process for that, of course, you're looking first for a literary agent. You need the literary agent, and then the literary agent is going to help you land a publisher, right? And the literary agent is going to want a few things. First, a query letter, where you're kind of pitching your book and talking about yourself, pitching yourself. And then they're probably going to want some kind of writing sample. This varies a lot from agent to agent, but they want something. If they're interested in that, then they are usually the next step is that they'll request a partial. So maybe they're going to request the first 30 pages or like the first few chapters. Again, that varies a lot, but they're going to want some more to read. Then they might request a full. And after they get the full manuscript, then they'll make a decision on whether they want to represent you, that sort of thing. So that's kind of what I have in mind with the query process. So for you guys, how is querying middle grade different? Kate, tell me how querying middle grade is different, please.
Yeah, from my experience, I do think there are less partial requests. Again, just coming from maybe the agents that I had queried or the small presses that I had queried. But I've received only fulls after sending my initial sample. And that could be just because of the total word count. It can range from, depending on if you're on the lower end of middle grade or the upper end of middle grade, 30 to max 70,000 words. So usually shorter than your adult books. So I think they usually just jump right in and say, let's take the whole full.
Yxavel, is that kind of your experience too, where partials are less common?
Yes, definitely. So I started querying in early 2022. So then when I was querying with the Serpent Rider, the only requests I got were fools as well. So yeah, definitely more towards the fools in the middle grade area. And I also noticed that I think agents are also looking for shorter word counts because I think with editing and the books that are being published now in middle grade, they're a lot shorter than they used to be. So I think when I queried the Serpent Rider, it was at 57,000 words. So definitely a lot shorter than some of the middle grade books that I had as comparison titles. And then I think agents are also looking for when you do send off that query and then your sample pages, they are looking for voice in those first 10 pages or whatever sample that they're requesting because with middle grade readers nowadays, they are looking to be pulled in very early on in the manuscript. So I feel like in modern middle grade querying, your pages really do need to be voicey. They to basically be hit the ground running to, I think, appeal to agents in the modern industry setting.
Love that. Yeah, that I've heard that before, from about querying and in all age groups. But yeah, like having a voice, I think I've heard specifically for the younger age groups is so key. Moniza, is that something that you feel is true, and do you kind of agree with the sentiment that like partials are less common? What's your take and what's your experience querying?
So I queried in 2018, so my experience might be a little outdated by now, but it seems to be the same as everyone else's. No, we didn't really do partials. I queried with a middle grade novel as well. We didn't do partials. It was just like if they liked your query, then they just requested the full. So it just went straight to full. And I agree that's probably because middle grade has a shorter word count anyway. And I also completely agree with Isabel that the word count has been going even shorter. So I don't know if that's because of like the price of paper or what, the cost of making books. But yeah, also just attention spans. But I think generally there's more of a demand for shorter books now.
Yeah. Kind of jumping in on that attention span. Over the past 10 years, like literally everybody, grown-ups and children alike, we have like an 8-second attention span. And I say it all often in my speech classes. So our pages really need to jump out in those first 10 pages. But I think I queried back in 2021. Totally new and like naive to what the querying process was. I didn't even understand what querying was. My first draft was 103,000 words, which is way too long for a middle grade novel, which I now know took a year to cut it in half. And then I ended up querying it at around 63,000. And I think the final version that printed for Skylight came out at around 65,000. But I'm clearly an overwriter. But those first few pages, if agents are asking for your first 3 chapters, they have to really feel and fall in love with the character from those first pages. Because if an adult's attention span is 8 seconds, a kid's going to sit there and it's hard enough to get a book in their hands. If they don't love that character from that first page, you're not going to get them. They're going to put it down and they're going to go off and watch YouTube and people doing silly pranks on TV and whatever it is that they watch. So there's so much work to go through. So I think in querying, agents are kind of trying to find the thing that captures what's selling and what's going to hold a child's attention at that age group. So our opening pages, well, all opening pages feel that pressure, but I think it feels even more in terms of querying. I think it's just, if it's your story is too niche, agents aren't going to want it. So I went in unpublished. I'm unagented still, but I published with a small press. And so that was kind of where I found my home for those middle grade stories.
That's a perfect segue into kind of our next question. Are there any particular rules for querying middle grade? And it sounds like kind of maybe this is for writing middle grade more so than querying, but still like you have to have that voice, right? You have to have something that's going to grab them early and hold their attention. Um, Kate, does that feel like a rule for you with the querying? And are there other rules that you think of when you've been through that query trenches?
Yeah, I think voice is huge, and I tend when in my writing I kind of go middle grade, more like quirky. You definitely want flawed characters. Um, so I definitely sort of lean into like being a little bit more silly in middle grade writing. And I hope that that appeals to young readers. But yeah, I think voice is definitely a huge something that they look for. And as well, I think you need to have just a hook right from the beginning. So your inciting incident, maybe it's 25% of the way through your book, but the first chapter has to be like, drawing people in immediately.
Right. Right. I see a lot of head nodding, a lot of agreeing. Yeah. Yeah. Like how does that attention grabbing differ in middle grade? And again, I guess we're kind of getting into like the writing of the middle grade rather than querying, but I promise we'll get back to querying. But like still, like, I think that that's kind of true for any story. You want to grab people's attention right away. But so how is that thought process different if you're writing for this age group? Isabel?
I think in middle grade, especially, the conflict and the stakes need to be very, very clear to the reader as soon as possible. So whether it's, a moon-eating sea serpent is going to swallow the last moon if the main character doesn't stop them, or if the main character's friend will move out of the city or move out of the country if they don't do this thing. So I think middle grade readers, especially, they want to be drawn in by conflict, by stakes that relate to the character personally, and is something that middle grade readers as well at that age group can personally relate to in some way, is very important when writing those opening pages for middle grade books.
I was just gonna say, I think middle grade also tends to be more action packed in general. Like there's less internal thoughts, depending, where you are in your story, but it's really focused on physical things happening. And then when you get into the YA, then the internal thoughts come in more seriously at that point.
Like
Fair.
building on that, you definitely
Yeah.
have to, I guess if you kind of link it back to the ideas of rules of querying middle grade, we have to understand the pacing of stories a little differently than in adult stories. We definitely have to understand word counts. And so the way that your middle grade novels are going to open up and develop, it goes at a much quicker pace. And then in terms of kind of merging that with voice and understanding, you're stuck between how kiddish do I sound in my query letters versus how adult and normal do I sound when I do it. So like it's making that differentiating between your own author's voice as a professional and then the character's voice within the stories, but being able to blend those within the query letters and the sample pages so that all of it can shine for an agent to read. We really have to know who our ideal end reader is. And querying is going to be a weird process because you're querying to adults. Like kids don't get to pick our kids aren't our literary agents and they aren't the ones who get to pick it at the end. So you still have to sell the story to adults, but knowing that your end user is an 8 to 12-year-old child. And so it's a weird, contradictory issue that you've got to deal
Yeah.
with and learn how to navigate. I think that's probably, for me, the biggest hurdle in looking at querying or thinking of querying is how do I balance those two worlds and those two audiences? Because they're two very different audiences.
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge with writing for children because children don't buy books. It's actually gatekeepers who decide what kids read. So the gatekeepers are, first of all, an agent and then an editor, and then librarians, teachers, parents. So when you are pitching your story, it can't just be about the kid. You also have to kind of think about, would this appeal to an adult who would think this might be a good story for a kid, which is a very difficult line to walk. I agree with that. That's a tough line to walk, and you can't forget about the kid as well, because ultimately when the child is given the book, if they don't like it, they won't read it. So that's still something you have to keep in mind. We talked about voice, but I think something else that kind of touches on the adult who is the gatekeeper is tone. Tone is a little different from voice, and that voice is like the way in which you write, but tone is the way you're pitching the story. And I write young adult as well. So that it's such a fine kind of like line to walk, because when you're pitching for kids, it's not about being kiddie, because if they sense that you're being kiddie, they're not going to want to read you. They want you to treat them like they're, normal people. So you can't be pandering, you can't be talking down to them, but at the same time, you have to be speaking at a level that is comfortable for them. And I think that's where the tone comes in.
Love that. Yeah. Man, you're both like I love the conversation that's going on here and talking about the querying. You kind of took the words out of my mouth, Patchree, into talking about whether it should be childish or adult. And Moniza, I think like you're doing such a great job too of communicating that it needs to be both, right? The story needs to appeal to the child, but kind of the pitch needs to appeal to the gatekeepers, right? So I guess like when you're querying, the sample needs to be the part that appeals to a child, and the query letter needs to communicate like a pitch that appeals to the gatekeepers and the adults, and like and why like a parent would want to buy this for their kids. Is that right?
Mhm.
I see head nodding. Okay, good,
I
good,
would,
good.
I mean, I would think so because we, as much as we, are authors, writers, we're all creatives. So we love the storytelling part of it. We're storytelling people. Humans are storytelling creatures. So you thrive on being creative and building these worlds. But for the publishers, sometimes as authors, we also have to remember that our stories are products and there's a business side to it. So if the agent doesn't know where it's going to sit on a shelf, if we don't understand the business part of it, then they're going to just reject it because they don't know what to do with it. And so it doesn't mean it's a bad story. It doesn't mean you're a horrible writer. It just means the business world isn't ready for whatever you're pitching at that moment. So as authors and middle grade authors or across the genres and age groups, we have to understand how to package those stories as a business and as a product and be able to let that shine so that whatever your vision is aligns with your agent and the editors, and your agent can go and sell it and say, yeah, it's going to sit next to these books and it's going to be great for fans of all these things. And yes, we're not trying to chase trends, but we have to understand what's out there, so that once we know our stories are products, to us, they're our babies. It's like we spent years, blood, sweat, and tears putting our stories down on paper, to just to have it go through all these hurdles. And then it's an interesting challenge. I think that you have to be able to balance that and know that it is a business, it is a product, and we have to be able to pitch it as such so that it aligns with what's there, even as unique and interesting our stories are.
Love it. So yeah, you're talking about it being a product, and like I'm imagining that the thing that like the way that you pitch it, and again, I haven't queried a middle grade, so but I get to learn from you guys, which is great. But like my thought is that like you sort of need to pitch it based on like themes and morals, and you're kind of drawing in like the parent is going to want their kid to read this because they like this the thing that they're going to learn from it. Is that usually like the angle that you find? I said, yeah, shaking head. Okay, all right, no, good.
Wasn't
I
the only
think
one shaking my head.
I didn't think so. No, I
Okay,
thought
all
there was a
right.
couple like, no, 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 you're so wrong, Nick, which is great. I love that. So tell me why I'm wrong. Let's start with you, Moniza.
Yeah, you definitely don't go morals or theme first. And in fact, you should never ever talk about morals or themes ever in your pitch. The pitch looks very similar to a pitch for any other genre or age group. So you basically lead with story first. You lead
Hmm.
with your characters and what the conflict is. And if your conflict is a conflict that makes sense, then the theme should be apparent and it should be implied. So I think you just structure it that way. And of course, you have to have your comps, which will give the agent an idea of where exactly your story stands in terms of the themes it covers and the kind of like the kind of story that you're telling.
Hmm.
So yeah, don't talk about themes at all ever.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. No, my bad. No, just kidding. No. Kate, I think I saw kind of a little bit of a head shake too. You want to like
Yeah,
add
I
on that?
think in terms of like morals, I would say like you don't have to go down that route. I think yes, your stories probably tell a lesson of some kind, but I mean, a lot of kids will see right through if your book is just trying to teach a lesson. And so even a lot of agents from the forefront are like, we don't want anything didactic. So just, if it's about how to share, it's not going to be, that's not like the whole plot of the book is just this is how you share. So there's, yeah, there's a balance between I guess in theory, like the agents and editors will understand the lessons after having read your full, but you don't have to include those in the query.
Um, Yxavel, like, are you also in the head shake? No, Nick, you got it so wrong group? Is it,
Yeah, well, I don't think it's entirely wrong because themes and morals are important to include as part of the story. But yeah, just in the querying stage as well. I did not mention the themes in my book when I was querying. So yeah,
Mhm.
agreeing with Moniza and Kate, um, allow the story to let the themes shine through, and then based on the strength of the story and then what you explore, your agent and then your editor will be able to sort of find out the themes from that without you having to explicitly say it. And yeah, I think I also do agree that having a strong story will let the themes shine through without explicitly saying this is what theme I'm trying to explore in the book. So just letting the strength of your story carry it, and then in the query, the themes will shine through just from the story. And then yeah, I guess themes become more important like later on in the publishing process. But then with querying, I didn't mention themes when I was querying my novel.
Okay, cool, cool. So Isabel, while I've got you right now, your story sounds really interesting. I love like the idea of cricket magic and like what I think you said, undead insects, like wild, love it. how did you pitch that? Like, I mean, was it were we in the query itself? Were you like, okay, stick with me here, cricket magic, or like how'd you pitch it?
Yeah, so The Firefly Crown is actually my second book on contract. So I didn't query it in the traditional way. It was more of like a pitch to my editor after I'd already written The Serpent Rider. But then the pitch that I gave to my editor was actually very similar to how I would structure a query if I was querying it from scratch. So yeah, basically so talking about like interesting plot and interesting stakes, I thought that the insect magic thing, which is also incorporated as part of Filipino folklore, so a way that I made it more interesting to a younger audience is relating it to the main character. So the main character herself has this ability, or should have the ability, to draw on this cricket magic, and then she will use it to save the world. So having the stakes there. And then without explicitly mentioning the themes in the actual pitch, I talked about she needs to save her family, needs to save her friends. So that's like implying themes about belonging, about caring for family, making new friends, because this character, the main character of the Firefly Crown, Yumi, is also a bit of an outcast in the city as well, because she's come in from the country in this world, so she's traveling to the capital city. So the idea of, yeah, belonging, found family, believing in yourself and chasing your dreams, even though the dream that other people want for you isn't the dream that you want for yourself. So in explaining what the story was about, it implied these inherent themes without having to explicitly say, these are the themes that I want to explore in the story.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. Okay. Let me have like the same question. I want to go Patchree, Moniza, Kate. Like how have you actually pitched your book? Like what does your query actually look like when you've sent your query for your book?
Sure. I only queried for Skylight, which was the Kai-inspired fantasy novel. It was my first novel, and it's very character driven. So it's pitching that outsider looking in, lost princess, chosen one tropes, with a Thai-inspired fantasy world where she's whisked away into a cloud-based, sky-based land, and just finds out that she is the lost princess, who everybody in this kingdom supposedly, they believe that she's died, but she's in the middle of a war, and so you're pitching the story and the narrative, and the themes aren't really there. I think my themes paragraph was more, it's a coming of age story that deals with her struggle. Sophia's the main character, her struggles of trying to find out who she is, and how to deal with this war or this world that everyone around her clearly knows who she is, being lied, this idea of kids being lied to by adults all the time. Those are like serious themes that come out, and how as a kid you have to try to negotiate that and be able to find your own voice, where it also has found family themes. So I think when you go into middle grade, there are certain buzzwords that they're already going to kind of look for. So found families, if you see on like manuscript wish list, people love middle grades that have found families. They want big grand adventures. They want fantasy worlds. If they want magic, they're going to tell you. For the longest time, even now, I still go, is this a portal fantasy? Because they don't go back and forth, and people are like, I don't want portal fantasies anymore. So it's having to navigate what those definitions are and how different agents will understand or define those things, knowing that, okay, well, this doesn't really fit in. But for me, it's hoping that that story and leading in with that character as your untraditional, reluctant heroine, female lead would draw enough, and then the story and the world becomes secondary. Uniqueness would be that it's a sky-based, Thai-inspired world, which isn't out there now. So I was leaning heavily onto culture and the characters versus themes.
Yeah, right, which clearly is the way to go. I understand that now. I think I said Moniza and then Kate.
Yeah.
Oh,
I actually dug up my query for the Fear Factory. I can read it out loud if you guys want, if it's helpful. So it goes, 12-year-old Sam Wells has never known his mom. She died when he was a baby. But when his grandmother calls him with a plane ticket to Singapore, the place where his mom grew up, he thinks he'll finally get to know his mom better. Singapore is everything he thought it would be. Grandma Jyoti has kept his mom's bedroom exactly the same, but while poking around in the room, Sam finds something unexpected. His mother's ghost. She has scabby knees, a skateboard, and is dressed in her old school uniform. She is 12. It turns out something terrible happened when Priya Malhotra was just a schoolgirl in Singapore. But she can't remember what, and now she is stuck as a kid and stuck on Earth until she figures the mystery out, and Sam has no choice but to help her, even if doing so means losing the closest thing he's ever had to having a mom. The Fear Factory is Small Spaces meets The Girl and the Ghost, a middle grade horror mystery steeped in Southeast Asian folklore. So that's the query letter. And if you
Nice.
look at the query letter, you can kind of tell how based on the story itself, you can tell what are some of the themes that would be explored in the story. Mostly themes to do with a sense of loss, how to grapple with the death of someone that you love, a mother or a friend. And these are not sexy topics. These are deep and kind of depressing topics, but it's a horror story. So even though the topics themselves are kind of heavy, because it's a horror story, we're able to explore them in a way that is still very exciting and quite entertaining. And I chose my comps very carefully because I'm writing a story that's set in Asia. So I chose The Girl and the Ghost, which is just an amazing middle grade novel. I don't know if you guys have read it, but it's set in Malaysia and it's beautiful. And my story is set in Singapore. So I thought that was a very good comp for that. And I also use, there is a lot of Southeast Asian mythology in my story. So I thought The Girl and the Ghost would be the perfect fit for that. And the reason why I chose Small Spaces, which again, I don't know if you guys have read it, but I strongly, highly recommend it. It's such a gorgeous novel. It's a horror story about a kid who's grappling with her mom's death. So I chose my comps in order to cover both the theme as well as the setting, and that way people would get a good sense of what kind of story this is. Also tone, because neither of these books, Small Spaces or The Girl and the Ghost, are like funny slapstick kind of humor books. They're more kind of they're a little bit more serious, and my story is a little bit more serious as well, even though there's some humor in it, because all middle grade has to have some humor in it. So I got the tone with those two comps as well. I hope that was helpful.
No, I think that's super cool. Thank you for sharing that. All right. I have like two follow-up questions for you, Moniza. First, now listen, like I'm usually in the indie space, so if this is actually a taboo question, tell me to like stuff it and we'll edit this out, okay? But like, when you were querying with that query, obviously it was successful. Can you tell us like roughly how many query letters you sent out to like succeed with that, or like, are we? Go ahead.
That is an excellent question because I did not query with that. I queried with a different book in 2018. This book, I always send a query letter out to my agent before I draft anything,
Mhm.
just to kind of get his sense of whether or not this is something that he always says yes. So I write a query letter for all my books regardless. It also helps me before I draft because then I get a good sense of what the story is. The book that I queried with, I don't have the query with me now, but that book ultimately did not sell to an editor. It died on sub.
Mhm.
But I did get 7 offers of rep on it, and it still died on sub. So who knows?
Wow, wow.
Who knows?
Publishing be crazy.
Yeah.
So my second follow-up for you, thank you for waiting, Kate. But like, you know, you mentioned this is a horror like story. Can you define horror for me? Because obviously, like horror, I think is a big genre, but to me, like I don't like scary stuff. And when I think of horror, I think of like scary stuff. But this, the at least the way you're presenting it, it doesn't sound scary. Just like I don't know. Tell how you define horror.
You have to be so careful when you're writing horror for kids
Hmm.
because they do like scary stuff. I mean,
Sure.
they'll be very disappointed if you say something is horror and then there's nothing scary in it.
Right.
So there are elements of my book that are quite terrifying. There's some chapters that have scared adults, but at the
Nope.
same time, you can't be so scary to the point where you're going to scar a child because, like we said, we write with adult gatekeepers in mind. And if you're literally giving children nightmares, librarians are not going to be recommending you to anyone. So we have to walk a very, very thin line when you're writing horror for children. I think Goosebumps is just the perfect kind of like horror for kids because it's funny, but also creepy and scary in equal measures and lots of action scenes. So it keeps kids engaged. But my book is not so much Goosebumps, it's more Small Spaces, which is very creepy, deliciously creepy, but also very touching and emotional. So I think it really depends on who your reader is because children are so diverse and they like different kinds of books.
Thank you. Thank you. And that, yeah, that's helpful. Kate, thank you for waiting while I indulged my curiosity. But yeah, can you tell us about your query for your book? And, obviously that was a successful query for you. Love to hear more about it.
Yeah, one thing actually just that I thought of as this came up is that I wonder if the pitches for middle grades are a little bit shorter. Again, just dealing with like the length of the book. So you query and you usually send in like the information covering the first third of your book. That third is going to be a little shorter than other books. So my query is also like 2 paragraph pitches. Um, and I did for the queer that ended up being successful, the small press that I worked with, they requested 3 comp novels. So I had been querying agents with just 2. So I don't know if that's helpful, but it was kind of fun to go through the comps. So I have The Magical Forest of Kelly Barnhill's The Girl Who Drank the Moon, The Whimsical Travels of L.D. Lipinski's Strange World Travel Agency, and The Curious Voice of P.G. Bell's Train to Impossible Places. So I kind of went setting, voice, and plot a little bit with my comps there. So yeah. And then obviously you have the bio section, but I did lead with the comps and then go into the pitch. Um, so that was my successful query.
Oh, okay. Can you tell us just a little bit more about like how you pitched it? Like
Yeah,
yeah, what was in that pitch?
pulled it up as well so I can read it.
Read it, read
It
it.
says 11-year-old Fiona has always admired the woods, whose trees are like fingerprints, each one unique. When her piano lesson is interrupted by a disembodied note, one which seems to be coming from the trees themselves, her admiration turns to intrigue. But Fiona isn't allowed in the woods. Even when a shadowy figure flits between the trees, she can't bring herself to break the rules. It isn't until the woods fall silent, so silent the leaves stop rustling, that Fiona tiptoes beyond the safety of her yard. In a moonlit clearing, Fiona discovers a piano whose magical keys open doors to 88 fantastical worlds. Wishing for a place she belongs, Fiona travels through worlds to locate the key that feels like home. She seeks advice from a gravity-immune baker, an arrogant hologram, and psychic triplets. But when she enters a charcoal city where the mayor controls even time itself, Fiona must trust her instincts to escape his prison or risk losing her newfound friends. So you
Mhm.
can see there's the hint at themes as well. So the sense of belonging and feeling lost and helping others and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Both of your like pitches have me wanting to learn more. You like 88 keys at open worlds. I'm like, ooh, really? Tell me more. And like the mom with the skateboard, I was like, oh, I didn't expect that. So I like, yeah, I mean, obviously they were both effective, but just kind of picking apart like the things that I like about it. That's cool. Let's flip the script a little bit. We just talked about what's effective. Let's talk about what's not effective. Clearly, we all agreed that my approach would be very bad, where, don't want to talk about themes and that sort of thing while you're querying, right? What other elements might turn off a middle grade literary agent? And I think like kind of connecting this with the other question that we touched on a little bit, like being too childish versus too adult. Like clearly you don't want to write your query as though it's to a child, right? That's something that would not be effective. And I'm seeing head nodding there, so at least I'm getting that right. Good. Yeah, what else might turn off a middle grade literary agent? Anyone want to jump in? Otherwise, I'm gonna
I would
pick.
I would assume because like I queried for a year and not knowing or understanding the conventions of what querying
Hmm.
was or what the querying process was, uh, I think that may be a big turnoff. So
Mm.
not understanding where the industry is or where the like what are the industry norms? Like I said, the original, I knew nothing about it. My original draft was 103,000 words. I was just happy that I could sit and like write that many words and that it became a story. And I was like so proud of myself going, yes, it took 4 years to do this and I did it. And so like I just jumped right in going, I know how to, I looked up like a form template of what it is because I'm a stickler for outlines and formats. So if you show me what the template is, I'm smart enough, I'm going to just write it. And then you want to put all your like all the not demographics or the all the themes and formats when you have the word counts in there. I didn't understand why it wasn't picking up. I'm like, this is an amazing story. You guys are
Mm.
like totally missing out. What's wrong with these
Mm.
people not knowing anything about publishing? And it wasn't until like 6 months to 9 months in and knowing that it took like 2, 3 months between rejections, that I even began to realize, oh, 103, that's like a lot. I guess I should learn the conventions a little bit better. And so I think what that would show for me now, looking back at it on what didn't work, I'm thinking that the fact that I didn't know the rules of the genre and the age group was the biggest turnoff. So what it says to me, and I put on like my boss cap. If I was an agent and I was an editor and I was the boss, like it's like reviewing resumes and people send you work experience that doesn't relate to the job at all. That's what it felt like. So if you're including information in your query letter that doesn't fit the norm or the expectations of the genre, your story can be fantastic and be amazing. But they're just like, we're not going to sell 100,000 word thing, not on a debut author, not on someone who's new and unproven. Now, if
Right.
you're Rick Riordan, right? You're gonna go and you've got like 6, 7 books under your things. You're Christina Suntervat, right? Where you've like a Newbery Award winner and you already have that relationship or that brand established. You can write whatever you want and people are gonna buy it because the fandom is already there. But as a new, untested author, someone who doesn't know the rules of the industry, it's like walking into a football game and with like your baseball gear on.
Mm.
You're not gonna pass. You're gonna be like, okay, or you got your swim gear on. It's like it's a clash. And so it's too much for an agent to want to take on. And it's probably too much for an editor or a publishing house to take on, where it's like, we don't have we're not gambling here. We're not buying lotto tickets. We want to know that the person knows that the work has to go into it. So I think not paying attention to what those conventions and those rules are, can be a big turnoff. And that's just speaking from getting those rejections, taking the time to say, okay, maybe I need to relook at this. Clearly I made those big boo-boos and I didn't know. But and of course, when you're in it, you don't want to admit that. But now you're like 4 or 5 years later, I'm like, oh, whatever, I don't care. I don't care. I get it. I understand it now. And I'm okay with it. I'm in a good place that I know, okay, the story's not bad. That's just how the industry is. So you have to know the
Yeah.
rules to be able to play the game.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah, especially I love your point too about like on a taking that risk on a debut because they're so risk adverse, right? And they're going to want someone that knows the rules and follows the rules. And plus it's that much cheaper to print fewer pages and fewer words,
Yes.
you know? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yxavel, you want to jump in and add to the conversation of things that are bad ideas?
Yeah, sure. I think it's also a bad idea to have the wrong tone as well when you're writing your pitch and then your sample pages, like we were talking about earlier. So there are a lot of people who think middle, and I was like this too once, but like middle grade just means the main character has to be like 12 or like in that age range. But then when you actually sit down to write the story, you're writing it in the style and tone of something that's like Lord of the Rings or June or something, and something that's way too old for like an older writing style compared to what kids want to actually read. So when I first started writing, I had characters who were young, but then because what I was reading at the time were like out of the middle grade genre, I was sort of translating that style into books that I was trying to make middle grade, and it just wasn't working because I wasn't familiar with the middle grade genre itself. So to avoid that, I would recommend like reading within the age range and getting familiar with what exactly is being published at the moment and what's doing well, so that you can sort of have that middle grade style and avoid the error of writing in an adult voice and an adult style in a middle grade book. So it's not enough to just have a character who is middle grade age. You need to write in the style of middle grade audience as well to be able to have the best chance in the query trenches.
Love it. We have Kate, if you can chime in on this, and then Moniza also on the same idea of how to turn off an agent so that we know the things not to do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so much is subjective, like, and things change very quickly. So when I was querying, my novel was 42,000 words, and I had like specific responses that would say, I can't imagine selling a book at that length. Um, and now I think that that would be an acceptable length, and it did sell to a small press, and the final book was 50,000 words, so it did grow through developmental edits. But I think to Patty's point, just pay attention to how things are changing over time, because what might not be selling the year that you're querying, if you hold on to that manuscript, it could totally change the landscape and even with what people are looking for. So again, portal fantasies were mentioned. I know that was not like a big topic. I know animal protagonists have been like a no, don't send us that. But I'm seeing these things popping back up in agents' manuscript wish list. So I think just keep an eye on what changes are happening.
It's all cyclical anyway, right? Everything that's like in a adult fantasy, like dragons are hot, dragons not hot, dragons are hot, dragons not. Anyway, Moniza.
I agree with what everyone said, and yeah, you're so right. 42,000 just a few years ago would be like too short, but then now they're looking for short, so it changes just like that. So you need to keep an eye on what agents and editors are looking for at the moment. But another thing I think is also your comp. I think if you have a comp that is just off, they're not going to be interested. So you have to show that the fact that you've read widely in your age group and genre through the comps that you choose. They need to be relevant, they need to be relatively current, they can't be too out there, they can't be too old. So yeah, I think the comps is where you show that you've done your research.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so can't use Dune for my middle grade fantasy as a comp. All right, got it, got it.
Can't use Harry Potter.
Yeah, all right. It's just like Harry Potter. Sure, they've never heard that before, right? Yeah. Um, okay, so this is perfect. Again, you guys are like making my job so easy. Maniza, you giving us a perfect segue into kind of the next question of like, how do we find out like what's selling right now and what agents are looking for, and how do we even find a middle grade literary agent to query? I know you guys have mentioned manuscript wish list a couple times, I think. Is that like how often are you guys like refreshing manuscript wish list on your favorite agents? Is that go ahead.
I don't check that stuff at all. I haven't queried in like 2 years, because I've just been focusing on trying to actually finish the other books and the other manuscripts. So again, that for me, it's a personal growth, knowing that I understand the industry better, and I understand myself better as a writer. But when I do, and if I watch things, I'm always on Twitter, I'm on social media. So the way that like my query and the way I found my small press and my publisher is through pitch contests. So I still like putting pitch contests, like doing pitch contests and putting pitches out there. So for me, like that's my introduction to it, where I feel like I don't cold query as much because I didn't think cold querying worked, even though everybody says, yes, cold querying still works. We still find gems through the slush piles. But you can look through Query Tracker, you can look on the manuscript wish list. But for me, I stay with social on the socials, and I see where the pitch contests are. And I work on that pitch, which is a totally different skill set to be able to do Twitter pitches or, like small pitch events, and putting your story. It's enough to, it's hard enough to write your book and then write a one-page query letter, but to put it in a 280 character pitch, that's even more. So learning to write log lines, it's a different it's a different skill set that you need. But for me, I look on socials just to see what people are looking at. And in terms of staying current, I watch too many cartoons. I watch more cartoons than my kids do, and I tell them what's interesting, and then they'll tell me, my kids like to watch indie shows, so they'll tell me what's interesting in the YouTube sphere, and then I can go, okay, well, that's kind of like this book, or that's kind of like this story, and it's kind of like these shows. So I like middle grade because I feel like I can sit there and watch cartoons and tell everybody I'm researching. And I do watch too much anime as well. So it's just like reading the kids' books is more fun, but being just aware and present in the field, knowing what's out there now, and what's interesting to you, rather than trying to, play to whatever's interesting in the field.
Moniza, I saw some nodding along as Patchree was talking there. You want to expand on some of what she was saying?
Yeah, I really genuinely love reading middle grade. So that's actually, I don't watch cartoons. Maybe I should start watching. But my favorite thing to read is middle grade. It's what I do for pleasure. But in terms of finding agents, I do think I didn't do the manuscript wish list thing either because I'm very disorganized. I'm not good at like lists and I'm not good at tracking. So instead, what I did was I followed agents on social media and I kept an eye on who was looking for what through social media. And that was how I found my agent. I did a pitching event called DV Pit, and DV Pit went away for a while, but DV Pit is back. So
Coming
if
back.
you wanna, yeah, it's back. So if you're a minority author who's looking for an agent, I think you can actually pitch for DV Pit. I don't have the information on when it's happening though, I think, but if you Googled it, I think you'd be able to find out. It has moved though, because Twitter unfortunately used to be just the hub of where all of these editors were, and there are still people there. Twitter is still happening, but it's just not happening at the same scale anymore. And I think a lot of the professionals who used to be on Twitter have now moved to Blue Sky. So if you are a writer, I would recommend having a profile on both, just even if you're not posting, just to keep an eye on what the editors and agents are posting on those platforms. Instagram is good too, but Instagram is not where any of these things happen. It's because it's word-based. So I would suggest Blue Sky and Twitter.
I'm like, okay, you mean X.com, right? That like
I will never. No, I refuse.
I
Yeah.
never call it that either. Yeah, it's so what that's a whole other thing. Anyway, Kate,
But
Kate, please
Yeah.
save me from ranting about that ridiculousness.
I find it kind of fun to look at manuscript which I don't know. I'm kind of weird in that like I like trying to find like the right match for my story. But I think the first time around I was kind of naive and I was just like, oh, if they want a magic forest, they will want this book. And that's not always the case. So I think I'm going to probably start querying my work in progress soon. And so I started like looking at manuscript wish lists again. I don't know how often they're updated necessarily, or, they can't update it every day based on what they're reading, who they've signed. So I think taking it as a guideline and not okay, this is the exact match, so I'll just apply to them. I think you have to kind of say, okay, well, they're looking for middle grade, they're looking for fantasy. Let's just throw this out there and hopefully it'll work out for them.
Yeah. I love that actually. How yeah, it's not a you shouldn't I mean the querying process is hard enough. We need to self-select some, but we can't like dismiss ourselves when it's not the perfect fit. You have to be able to go like, okay, I think there's a good enough fit. I'm gonna take a shot with this person, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so many of the wish lists are like, I like surprises, so you gotta have to
Yeah.
throw them some surprises.
Right? Maybe like cricket magic. What? I was surprised. uh Yxavel, can you jump in here?
Yeah, sure. So when I was searching up agents to query, I mainly used Publishers Marketplace, so where they announce all of the deals. So I was looking for agents who are making deals in the genres that I was interested in. So agents who are making deals in middle grade fantasy, which is what I was working on, were agents that I put on my list to query. And I also looked in the acknowledgement sections of the middle grade books that I was wanting, that I wanted my book. Like, if I thought about it as if I wanted my book to sit on a shelf with other books, what other books would they be? And then sort of looking for those similar books in similar genres and categories, and then looking in the acknowledgement section and seeing which agent represented this author. And then, yeah, so one of the books that I read was called The Dragon Warrior by Katie Zhao, who is also represented by Penny Moore. So then when I read her book, I was like, this is really cool. I'm writing something that's similar in genre and category to this book. So then I looked in the acknowledgement, saw that Penny was the agent, and then sent a query to Penny, who ended up becoming my agent. So that's another way that I found agents on my radar that I wanted to query.
All right. I got just a couple more questions, I think. So, Patchree, I want to start with you. You're with a small press, right? Okay. Okay. So, yeah, I remember I was speaking with a author last year at Write Hive last year. That was great. Love Let's Write Hive Con each and every year. And she was writing kind of in this age group. It might have been more YA, but I think it was middle grade. And she was talking about how like the thing that like makes her explode is the Scholastic Book Fair, right? And again, I do adult fiction, so that's not a thing. But like, I also am more inclined indie, which also makes Scholastic Book Fair not a thing, you know. Um, so like, I thought that was really interesting, but I know that that sort of thing is not available for me. So as a small press author, is that sort of thing available for you, or like, you know, what. So you see you shaking your head no, which is a shame. But what is good about small press? And you know, I'd like to kind of hear from each of you about like, you know, what is good, what options are available? Because in my mind, I'm assuming that indie is not super viable. Like self-publish is probably not the way to go for middle grade. Um, but maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong already in our discussion, you know. So, but I'd love to hear some of that and like what your thoughts are on how to even approach. I know we've been talking about querying, but like, are there other options? You know, so please, Patchree.
Yeah. Um, yes. So in terms of being with the small press, one, I like being with the small press because it's like I feel like I'm in a partnership with my press. I was the very first. They are my book is published with Sora Books, which is an imprint of Scheherazade Shelves, and Scheherazade Shelves is a Muslim imprint. So they really have a mission. It was founded by two sisters, and their mission is to change Muslim representation. So a lot of their catalog and their authors and the other books in their press are mostly Muslim related books. But Skylight was they're pitching it as a both Skylight and the White Elephant of Hippopan are Muslim friendly books. So I'm already in a very with the small press. I love their mission, and I love what these girls are doing, and I'm sure they'll hate that I call them girls, but because they're like in their 20s, and I'm like, you guys are babies to me, and everybody's just like anyone who's not in their 40s or clearly older than me. I'm like, you guys are just babies to me, so I'm gonna call you kids all the time. But I loved their mission and their enthusiasm, and so I was really, really excited to sign on with them. And then originally the Skylight is meant to be a trilogy. They wanted to sign the trilogy, and I was like, full stop. I don't know how long it's going to take me to write this. So let's just do one thing at a time because that's how my brain kind of works. I can't even tell you what I'm going to do next week, yet alone in 2, 3 years from now. So let's not go there. But I liked the small press experience because I learned so much about the industry and I learned about the process and I liked to be involved. I got to pick my cover artist. I was really there the whole time in terms of the themes of putting these things. I got my daughter to do the interior artwork for the book because she's an artist. And so having that flexibility and that conversation, it feels like I'm calling my friend saying, hey, okay, I have this crazy idea. What do you guys think? But it was the first time for them dealing with a non-Muslim story. And so for me, there are some challenges as well. But marketing it and pitching it because you're with the small press means it's a lot harder. It's almost, It's like non-existent. The marketing support is really me. And I hated social media. I avoided social media like the plague for the longest time. But when I decided to publish and I had the deal, I went all in with it. I made a website and I signed up on all this crazy platforms. And now I'm just like exhausted from it. But small press doesn't have, they're small press. Like it's literally her part-time gig while she has to go to work on a regular basis. And so you're negotiating when you're in that indie space, everybody understands that, but it becomes more challenging for middle grade work because you can't get into the schools as easily. You can't get into libraries as easily. You can't get into bookstores that easily. My biggest surprise was trying all of it. 6 months out, 8 months before, saying, "Hey, I'm a local author. I'm here in LA. We've got like a bunch of kid related bookstores. We've got powerhouses. I mean, like Dan Santat, he literally did a live event at the local library while I was in that pre-publishing age. And I would call or email bookstores. And my biggest slap in the face was a bookstore saying, "Oh, we don't know that press," or "Your book's not big enough for us to carry it. We have limited space." And then when I hit that and I heard it, I was like, what? And so it kind of made me stop. And I drew back and stepped back a lot and kind of you get that imposter syndrome going, maybe it's not going to do as well. But I still kind of pushed forward. You have to do your own work where that's the indie author in you, where you have to push to get your book into the libraries. You have to contact the schools if you want to do school events. I've yet to do any school events. My kids don't like to read. So even though I know their teachers, I can't call their teacher and say, "Hey, can I come and talk about the book?" Because they're like, "Your son doesn't even want to read." But I sit there and it's about just being okay with it and knowing if you're willing to put in the work, it's going to be a lot harder and it's more challenging from a small press with those because you can't compete with Scholastic and you're not going to be pulled in with Scholastics and you're not going to be on their book fairs. And then even with that, you're dealing with book bans and you're dealing with all these other things where parents are like, "I don't want them reading about Thai people. They've got weird words in there." And so whatever that is, you're already dealing with a lot of other things. So I like the small press because of the control. I don't like the lack of marketing support. But I'm getting better and then you're trying to figure out how things are going. But even getting trade reviews, I think with libraries, it's oh, you need to have trade reviews. Kirkus has to review you. The school Librarians Association has to have a review for you, and you got to make it on those lists. The Publishers Weekly, they need to be on those lists, and it's really hard for small presses to break through that barrier. Like I was fortunate, we did get a Kirkus because I sent it to her. I'm like, "Can you just send it and maybe they'll look at it?" So we're like, I understood we were both learning as we went through that process. So now I just feel like I know more and have a better gauge, but not to, hate I love my press. I love the small press, but there are definitely those challenges for the children's lit
Yeah.
space in general when I'm
No,
right.
no, that was a very good rant. I appreciate you sharing. That was, yeah, we're learning. It's good. Um, Kate, anything to kind of add or talk about like your experience with your publisher and
Yeah, I think I have similar thoughts to Patty where um, my editor is great and amazing and could chat on the phone about all the changes that need to be made. And my publisher is super like responsive to questions and things like that. But the marketing is just sometimes tough, especially the issue we brought up earlier where you're on social media, so you're marketing to the parents, but they're not the ones going to read it. So finding that balance and getting into libraries, it's possible you can get into some. They won't be widely spread. So I've done giveaways. I've made it into 15 libraries and I feel pretty good about that. And I've made it into 2 bookstores. And I think my goal going into publishing this book was like 1 library and 1 bookstore. So I feel like it's
nailed
possible. Yeah. So,
it?
it's possible to get in there. It's just going to be a little bit more work on your part. So.
Yxavel and then Moniza, thoughts on this, different paths and your experience with your publisher?
Yeah, sure. So um, my books are published by Bloomsbury, which I think is classified as a major independent, I believe. So yeah, coming off on the marketing thing, my experience with Bloomsbury has been I haven't really had to do a lot of as much marketing from my end, because I've never really been like a social media type of person. Like I only made a writing account when I got the book deal. So I've never really been the type of person to talk about myself and my projects. So I think having that sort of marketing support and not only promotion via social media, but also promoting to schools and libraries as well, was something that was really helpful. And it like the distribution as well. So it's my book is distributed in a bunch of different bookstores, and has got like trade reviews. So my publisher submitted the 2 trade reviews, and I think it's like automatic for all of their projects. So yeah, those are definitely the pluses, and yeah, why I went to the agent route when I wanted to publish my writing, because I knew I wasn't really keen on doing a lot of it myself. So I wanted to give my manuscripts the best shot at getting out there through a traditional publisher and agent method.
Yeah, yeah. Distribution is the thing that the publishers still have on lock, like more than anything. But Moniza?
Yeah, I think my experience is a little bit more similar to Isabel's. So I have 3 different books now. One is with Street Puppy Masjid Cat is with Little Bee Books, which is a smaller publisher, but then they are distributed through Simon and Schuster. And then my middle grade novel, The Fear Factory, is with Holiday House, which is again a smaller publisher, but then they're distributed through Penguin Random House. And then I have a book with Penguin Random House, and that's distributed through Penguin Random House, one should hope. So in all of these cases, I think distribution, they have the channels. You don't have to worry about that. It will get to the bookstores on their end. And the trade reviews are also pretty much automatic. It will happen on their end. So the trade reviews are there, everything, all of that is there. Reaching out to different writers for blurbs. I'm doing that with Street Puppy Masjid Cat right now. So they help you reach out to different authors, but then you can also kind of like give them a list of authors who are likely to give you blurbs. So these are things that I think they have systems in place for. All of that said, there's still a lot of stuff I think that we still need to do on our own. So you do still ultimately need to create a social media platform, and you do need to try and reach out to readers as much as you can. And they're not going to arrange for you to go to any schools. Like that's not gonna happen. This is not something that they do for normal writers. I think they do it for writers that they've paid a lot of money for, but not for like your standard. It's also very unlikely that they're going to arrange for you to go to different bookstores and get book tours. I think if you're someone that they're really, really investing in, they do that for you, but they're not going to do that for me. So these are things that you still need to hustle and plan on your own if you can. For me, the whole process is further complicated by the fact that I'm not based in the US, but my book is, I sold North American rights, so it's coming out in the US, but I'm in the UK. So I don't even know if the books are going to be available here. I guess I'll find out. So that complicates things a little bit as well on my end. Which is why I went the traditional route, because I figured it would just give my books the best chance to really find their way into bookstores.
Just thinking about the international ridiculousness, I remember hearing similar stories of selling to like an American author sold to UK rights, and then they're like, "Wait, you're gonna have to sell it to a US like the same publisher with the US version? This is wild." But somehow it seems to work. I guess these publishers know how to get the books in the bookstores. All right. Well, we've been chatting for a while. This has been lovely. I think it's about time to wrap it up. So let me go, Yxavel, Moniza, Kate, and Patchree. First of all, thank you all. I definitely learned some things, and my ideas, some of them were incorrect, which is great. Um, but thank you all for being here. Let's go through that list, and then I'd love for each of you to just tell folks where they can learn more about your work and any kind of closing thoughts you have, any last minute advice for querying you might want to share, that sort of thing.
So
Yeah.
thanks so much, Nicholas, for moderating this panel, and it was so nice to chat with all of you as well. So really grateful for this opportunity. You can find out more about my books on my website, and I'm also on Instagram as well. Last closing thoughts are, if you are writing middle grade, it is becoming increasingly competitive as the years go by. But just the one key takeaway that I have is not to give up on middle grade, as we've been saying throughout the panel. Your story will find a home. It just might be a question of when, but then yeah, trends cycle through. So don't give up on your idea and just keep writing, keep honing your craft, and eventually it's going to find its home with the right channels. So yeah, best of luck and thanks so much.
So you can find me on all of the social media platforms. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and I'm also on Blue Sky under my own name, Moniza Hossain. And if you want to find out more about my books, I have a website as well, but you can find out about the books on Instagram or Twitter. My advice would be to read widely. We love middle grade. We want to write more middle grade, and we want to make sure that kids have access to these books because middle grade is where we lose readers. So if they don't keep reading when they're that age group, they're gonna not be reading when they're older. It's a very important age group. So I would say just read that age group and support other writers in that age group as well.
Yeah, so I am on most social media sites as Kate DeMaio Writes. Um, and I think that what's been great, even though the querying trenches can be hard, as a middle grade author, getting responses from kids or parents being like, my daughter brought this to school. She was reading it at breakfast this morning. They're reading it right now and they love this book. It's the feedback that you get is so great and fun to hear. So push through the querying trenches, and once you find your home, it'll be great from there.
Yes, you can find me on most social medias as well. On Twitter, I'm actually Points Tangent, but Patchree Jones everywhere else on Instagram, Blue Sky. I primarily I'm on Instagram and Twitter more often. Blue Sky now, I know I need to get back into it. DV Pit is on Blue Sky in October. So we were saying that earlier on. But patchreyjones.com is my website, and I try to keep all of my things posted and updated there. In terms of advice or last final thoughts, for middle grade writers, for me, I think you need to find your community. Um, it's tough for all writers, and so that's kind of a general comment to any writer. But for middle grade, because we kind of, and even kid lit in general, because we don't always just write middle grade, a lot of us write across age groups. So you're going to write picture books, right? When he's writing picture books, you're going to go into YA and you're going to deal with middle grades and chapter books, and you have all these different age categories and genres. And that's not something that adult writers, or not adult writers, but those who write for adult audiences can always relate to. So if you find your community, that is where you definitely want to go. Like Kate's my critique partner. So she's the one who keeps me writing all the time. If I don't get an email from her once a month, it's really hard for me to stay accountable and stay focused. So then it's like when you have that team and those people that you can lean on and support you, and you're going through the same thing, that's going to keep you motivated. And then we're all going to go on the journey together, and it feels less alone and challenging than if you're just kind of going at it by yourself. So definitely my advice is find your community within the genre that you're writing, and don't feel like you need to rush it. There's no deadline on when you're going to have to be published, right?
I love that so much. So much. I wrote my first book more than a decade ago. Like, coming up on 2 decades ago. I feel old. But like, it was a very lonely affair. And like now I'm kind of getting back to the writing world, and the difference a community makes is so huge. Right Hive, of course, the wonderful con that's going on now, but it's not just a con. There's a wonderful community that's year round. If you have, well, whether you have writing friends or not, I encourage you to go check out Right Hive and engage with this wonderful community. You're going to be so much better off having a community to talk to and to slog through the query trenches with. Trust me. Like, Well, thank you, ladies. This has been absolutely delightful. I appreciate the conversation. I hope all the audience has enjoyed it. And thank you to Right Hive for putting on the con. Thank you, audience, for being here. That's it. We'll see you on the next one.